Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone. Welcome to the 10th Leader Post Rider Rumblings podcast. I hope you enjoyed the Leader Post Symphony Orchestra. We commissioned them to play that theme song for us, and it's very, very enlivening. But I'm not, so we brought in a couple of special guests in an attempt to save the program. To my right, from 980 CJME, host of the Green Zone, Jamie Nye, the sports guy. Have I got all your titles correct?
Thanks for adding that last part in. That's very important.
It is crucial. So I got it right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Taylor's title is much more succinct. Global Regina's Taylor Shire. How's that?
That's easy. That's
I
good.
nailed
like
it.
That.
I don't remember my name at the moment, so we'll just continue. It's a little humbling to have two broadcasters in at the same time because my naturally relaxed cadence generally is exposed and as a result mocked when you have two people who talk professionally and so well for a living.
Well, we can try to bring it down for you, Rob.
I think I can do that all by myself. The Riders have been erratic this year. They've alternately brought people down and uplifted them, at least to a degree, after 4 games. So for the next 3 hours and 28 minutes, we're going to... Sorry, that's a bad joke. We're going to discuss the state of the Rough Riders after 4 games. They're now on a bye week. And just assess where they are at this point of the season, to the extent that that can be discerned, because there's been so many different signals we've gotten from this football team. I'll just throw it out there. I'll do it alphabetically. Jamie, what do you think of what do you make of this team? Because I'm not sure you can really get a handle on it so far.
Well, that's the problem. We thought this was going to be a pretty good football team at the start of the season. When you looked at the schedule, 5 games against the East, 3 of those at home at Mosaic Stadium, and I think there was talk of could they go 5-0, 4-1, 3-2 at the worst. So at 2-2, I think there's reason to have some trepidation all of a sudden about how good this football team is, especially when you see Calgary come out of the gate. A lot of people, again, predicted, Calgary probably going to have a letdown. They lost a lot of Charleston Hughes and Jerome Messam, etc., but they're off to a 3-0 start and look like, again, the team to beat. Winnipeg, now that Matt Nichols is back, they look pretty good. Edmonton, yes, they're 2-2 with the Saskatchewan-Roughriders, but I think their games have been higher quality than the Riders have, especially on the offensive side of the football. And that is 2 out of 3 phases, pretty good, I think. Defense and special teams. It is the offensive side that you go, can this offense beat the best offenses? Can they outscore them if need be when they need to later on in the season? And we're going to find out after the bye week, after that Hamilton game. It is Calgary, Edmonton, Calgary in 3 big games for the Riders.
It's sort of like this podcast. 2 out of the 3 phases are pretty good. I will not disclose who the weak link is out of sheer embarrassment. Taylor, what do you make of this team?
Well, even watching that game against Hamilton last week, you kind of expected the defense would have to score in order for the Riders to win the game, or special teams. The offense wasn't moving the ball. Nothing really was happening. They got that late touchdown drive on 2 nice plays, but they didn't ever put together drive after drive that got them into better field position. So you can count that as a win, but it certainly wasn't a nice win, and it wasn't. I don't know if it was a step forward for the team in terms of how the offensive production looks. I think it was sloppy, and it was not, if they do that in Hamilton, I think they'll lose unless the defense scores 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, it seems to me that game will likely be a one-off. If the offense doesn't improve, they're not going to win like that very often.
Well, maybe 1 or 2, but you're not going to make the playoffs like that.
Yeah, you're going to be a 5-13 team at best if you keep doing that. Now, the question, and I think the great unknown right now, is when or if does Zach Caleros come back? And if he does, he wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire when he was there. And is it even reasonable to think that a quarterback can set the world on fire given an offensive line that's so-so, a receiving core that's below average, a running game that's... I think they got good running backs, but they don't really use them very well, and the scheme is questionable, and Duron Carter's still playing defense. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, thanks for being with us. Goodbye. Is what, does the Duron Carter situation, what can you reasonably expect of that offense, regardless who is quarterbacking it right now? I think the ceiling is pretty low.
And I think the floor has been set low. I think the ceiling can still actually be pretty high. I think the offensive line, there are ways around make an offensive line work, and you need a quarterback being able to make those quick reads. And maybe when you have Bridge and Watford, roll them out of the pocket, let them extend the play, maybe split the field in half, simplify the game a little more for the Rider quarterbacks, and you can get around the fact that, okay, there's some pressures, there's some, on the quarterback, and alleviate some of that. Try max protect like you see from the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who last year when our offensive line was leaking like a sieve, Zach Caleros was getting hit. So what did they do? Max protect Jeremiah Masoli, make sure he has the time to find the quicker receivers that he had, and they brought Brandon Banks. You saw an offense change mid-season last year for Hamilton. I think you need to see that from the Riders as well. Some creativity from this offense could go a long way, and we're hearing a lot about that lack of creativity from Stephen McAdoo, who should be wearing some of this, if not most of it, rather than Chris Jones, because Chris Jones's defense last week against Hamilton, that was a defense where you saw the genius of Chris Jones do some things in the CFL that's rare to have DBs matched up one-on-one with a receiver almost all night, rather than adjusting to the short side and the strong side of the field.
Taylor, I've been itching to ask this question of you, so I will. I think you had the toughest job in the media in Regina the last 2 weeks, trying to cut a highlight package from the Rough Rider game. First, the Montreal game, virtually nothing to see there. And then the Hamilton game, where there's basically 2 offensive plays. Where are the highlights?
You don't have to be selective. You just kind of pick the 4 plays that decide the game, and that's it. But I think certainly looking at the highlights from the Montreal game, first of all, the quarterbacks didn't protect the ball. So I think the floor was set at the lowest point in that game. And yeah, the Hamilton game was ugly, but at least the quarterbacks protected the ball, and that's a step forward. So there was fewer interceptions to show in the Hamilton game, but really it was 3 plays that won the Riders that game.
I wonder if it just all evened out. They shouldn't have lost to Montreal, and they shouldn't have beaten Hamilton.
Yeah.
So over those 2 games, maybe the law of averages, maybe equilibrium, just maybe they should be a 2-2 football team right now.
Good teams win those football games when it's like the Riders. There's no way they should have lost to Montreal.
Look at what everybody else did to Montreal this season. It hasn't even been close. Yeah, they're pounding them, and then Montreal comes into Saskatchewan, and you lay an egg like that. I don't care who the quarterback was, because Zach Caleros was out. You need to win that football game, and that is one that I have circled all year long, because if they're 8-10 at the end of the year and miss the playoffs by a win, you go back to that Montreal game and how bad they were against the worst team in the league.
I'm not sure they laid an egg. I think that was the entire hen, wasn't it? This madcap comedy is just amazing. It's such a strange season though. Like they just, I looked at the first game against Toronto, and I think they played a pretty complete game. The second game was, it just got away from them. Their quarterback got hurt. I think by this point last year we had, I guess there were still questions. The offense was playing pretty well, but the defense was a bit of a puzzle. This year it seems like the opposite is true. So maybe at the 4-game mark it's a little premature. They were 1-3 last year. They were 2-4, and they ended up winning 10 games and almost going to the Grey Cup. So, but I think there were more signs at this point last year that this team had something. And maybe that's due to the fact that it's easy to concentrate on the offense. And Kevin Glenn got out of the gate pretty well last year, and it was a fun team to watch through 4 games. And this isn't very much fun to watch at all.
I still think this team does have something. I think they can do very good things. But when you look at the stats of lowest offensive points scored, lowest offensive touchdowns, most turnovers, most thrown interceptions, last when it comes to yards on first down, that is an offense that needs a redo completely. And if that doesn't turn around, I don't think there's much hope that a defense in the CFL is going to be able to carry a team all the way to the Grey Cup. Chris Jones cited it after the game about the Baltimore Ravens with Trent Dilfer were able to do it. I went back there. It's been rare where a team has averaged less than 25 points per game and were a Grey Cup champion. I think it happened twice in the last 40 years where a team has been below 25 points per game and won the Grey Cup. averaging on offense.
Every now and then you get those fluky Grey Cups where, for example, Marcus Crandall was the quarterback when Calgary won a Grey Cup, upsetting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in 2001. You had Sean Salisbury quarterbacking Winnipeg to a Grey Cup championship in 1988. You had Rick Casada, of all people, who was, I think, 9 for 42 with the Riders in 1948. 1968. 9 for 42. Like, let's do the quarterback rating on that.
That Winnipeg 88 team was one of the two. I think they had 22 points per game, and they won the Grey Cup.
So you're gonna have that periodically, but that is such an aberration. And especially when they made the big play for the quarterback during the off season, you thought that was one of the areas that they were determined to improve, and we still don't know.
Well, last year at this time we were talking about the defense, and they were all positive through the first 4 games of the season about how they're still coming together, they're learning from each other, they'll figure things out. And the offense was clicking for the most part. They ended up leading the league in touchdown passes. Kevin Glenn looked good, and when he didn't, Brandon Bridge came in and looked fine. But now it's the opposite, and the offense certainly isn't working. They're not winning any football games. As much as they had a nice drive in that one Hamilton game, the defense has won them the game so far.
What's interesting to me is that the fact that they won last night hasn't really assuaged many of the critics.
I couldn't imagine if they would have lost. It would have been bad. Like the week prior, there was almost people pressing the panic button already. There was, we need new this, fire Jones, this, that, and the other. And then now they win, but it still isn't as positive as it could have been.
I'm surprised that, well, maybe I'm not, but Chris Jones, I think, deserves more credit than he got after and I absolutely went after him after the Montreal game. That was on him in so many ways. But I think the Hamilton game, you can look at it and say, okay, that's on him too. That was a defensive performance with all sorts of trickery and a lot of things people hadn't seen before. That's how they won the game. And the special teams were exceptional. But Chris Jones on defense was so amazing against Hamilton. Why doesn't this man get credit for the good things that he does around here?
Well, I don't think he's doing everything that good.
Yeah.
I don't know why Deron Carter's still at cornerback.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the top players in the whole league is playing in a spot where he's not even close to one of the top players at his position, let alone in the league. So there's certainly things that, he's doing well calling his defense, but it's pretty simple, and it's a lot of the players doing, he's basically calling 2 or 3 defenses all game, he says. So it's those guys doing it, going out there. But they have, increased their pressures and whatnot. So he deserves credit on the defensive side, but as overall team management, I wouldn't say quite yet he's reached where he wants to be.
I guess it wouldn't be a podcast or a media discussion pertaining to the Rough Riders without talking about the Deron Carter situation ad nauseum. I've never seen a coaching decision quite like this one, where it seems so cut and dried that this is a bad idea. But Chris Jones is seemingly intractable as far as leaving Deron Carter in the defensive backfield at a time when the offense is such a liability. Like, what's the upside for this? What is the possible justification? Because I just can't see it. But I'm not that intelligent either. That's why we brought you two in.
I don't understand. I've never understood why you have a 1,000-yard receiver not on your offense. I don't care how athletic he is, because Deron Carter hasn't been a lights-out defender. Yes, he has the 2 pick sixes, but those were badly thrown balls where he might have been in the wrong place, which sometimes happens on the defensive secondary. And then he made athletic plays to get the touchdown. Ooh, a guy that makes athletic plays to get a touchdown. You could use that on this offense right now. And some people will say, well, Shaq Evans is the second leading receiver on the team behind Naaman Roosevelt. Okay, let's take Williams Lambert out of the offense, put Shaq Evans there, and have Deron Carter. That makes things look a lot better. This offense needs help. Deron Carter can help, and that's why I don't understand it. There's one spot on this team that needs the help, and it's not the defensive side. But is this a trend with Chris Jones? He's the defensive coordinator. Toby Antigua was a receiver. Saw the athleticism. Made him a defensive player. Kevin Francis, who they drafted, was a receiver in college. Athletic. Let's make him a defensive player. Deron Carter. Okay, he's athletic. Let's make him a defensive player. The only time we've seen the crossover is for the offensive line, which is okay, let's make this big defensive tackle Canadian an offensive lineman, because I'm going to have Mikael Brooks come in and play defensive tackle rather than have two Canadians there.
Duron Carter is great. Shaq Evans is good. Duron Carter is great.
Yeah,
That's how I see it.
And no defensive coordinator is going to say, oh, no, we're facing Shaq Evans this week. In time, they may.
Yeah.
But I think what they're also doing is limiting the production of Naaman Roosevelt, because it's so easy for a defensive coordinator to look at that Rough Rider offense and say, okay, number 82, that's what we have to worry about. Last year, back-to-back games, there were plays where Duron Carter was a decoy, almost looked like he was going to run one of those jet sweeps. And the defense was just totally sucked in by that. And Naaman Roosevelt went deep for touchdowns 2 plays in a row because the defense was so preoccupied with where Duron Carter was and what is he going to do. And it just liberated the passing game and created all sorts of opportunities one-on-one for Naaman Roosevelt. I mean, right now there's really no... It's got to be pretty easy to scheme against this Rough Rider offense. And suddenly if you have Carter and Roosevelt... then it gets interesting, and it gets tougher to scheme against these teams, and you can't double team both of them, and that's where they're just the domino effect of not having Duron Carter on offense. It affects the receivers, it affects the quarterback, it affects the running game because teams don't really have to worry about the passing game very much. It's not by accident. This offense is bad. It's almost been planned that way, hasn't it?
For all the off-season workouts that they do and they hold, and all the mini camps and this, that, and the other. How can they not find more than one starting defensive back? They found Nick Marshall, and he started, and he was great. How is there nobody else to back up, or even on the practice roster for the last few years? That's what amazes me about this whole situation. Leave the guy where he can most excel. Put Carter at receiver. Find a backup defensive back that you can train, that's been on the practice roster for a few weeks, and that can come in and play.
Well, they re-signed Duron Carter as a free agent last February, and that would have been for 6 figures. Now, suppose that Duron Carter had said, I'm a free agent, but I'm only going to play defensive back. Would anybody have offered him that money? No. So if you look at that and you're saying, we're spending that much money on an experimental defensive back, that's just not good salary cap management as much as anything. They let go of Enoch Muamba for monetary reasons. Now they're paying way too much for an American defensive back. And that generally isn't a big ticket player. If it is, it's Ed Gainey, and I guarantee Ed Gainey isn't making close to what Duron Carter is.
And when you look at the cuts made and why the offense is struggling, well, you have Williams Lambert instead of Bakari Grant. You have Josh Stanford, and I've liked what I've seen from Josh Stanford. There's been rare swings and home runs from the Riders' drafting point of view since Chris Jones. Stanford was their final pick in their first draft, and I think he's developed well, but you'd have Rob Bagg out of there. You have Peter Diakowski no longer on the offensive line, where you're rotating a Canadian and American. Now they've settled on Dariusz Bladek, who has had his problems, but he's young and he's developing, and I get it. But that's what these are probably cap moves more than anything, but you're throwing a 6-figure guy on defense rather than offense. That Chris Jones has been puzzling for a lot of his time here, and last year there was not a lot to complain about the way that season ended, a play away from the Grey Cup going through the East. But this season again, you're asking the questions, and you can do all of this stuff. You can cut all these players, you can put Carter on defense, you can switch Bridge for Watford, you can do all of that stuff if you win. If you lose, well, it leads to the criticism Chris Jones has been hearing for the first 4 weeks of the season.
And some of it has been about that quarterback rotation, Taylor. I don't get this one. I understand at one point they were touting Brandon Bridge as sort of a 1 and 1A, a 1 or 1A in tandem with Zach Caleros. And now he can't even start definitively ahead of David Watford. I don't see how this quarterback rotation can benefit them either, because it's high school.
It's unconventional, and it doesn't help the quarterbacks. The fact that you get 2 series to go in, and if you don't do something amazing, you're going to be pulled, and the other guy's going to come in. That doesn't work. Think about any quarterback. Bo Levi Mitchell doesn't start the game with 2 touchdown passes on his first 2 drives. Sometimes you take a little while to get into it. You got to let the quarterback develop, and that's all part of development. Let him play 4 games. If I was in this position, Collaros gets hurt. All right, Bridge, you have 4 games. You have 4 or 5 games to show me what you have. And if you don't really, show at least some development or some better playmaking abilities, then we're going to try the other guy for 4 games.
And sometimes there's something to be said for patience. I'm going to take both of you back to a game you're too young to remember. Well, sort of. Jamie, you were, 8? 1989? Taylor, what were you doing in it? You were in a crib?
1 month away from being born.
Oh, wow.
I got to go.
Yeah, I'm so old. Can we end this now? I don't have much time left. Riders are trailing Hamilton 13-1 in the 89 Grey Cup. And it was I think everybody in the team knew that John Gregory liked Tom Burgess more than Ken Austin. And Tom Burgess had come in the 89 Western Final after Ken Austin got hurt and lit up the Edmonton Eskimos. They won the game. So they're trailing 13-1, and some of the players on the bench are kind of going, what's he going to do now? And Ken Austin went up to John Gregory and said, do not take me out of this game. Well, he ended up throwing for 474 yards and 3 touchdowns, being named the MVP. They stuck with him. Now, that's Ken Austin. That's not Brandon Bridge.
Yeah. That's
not David Watford. But I think there's something to be said for letting a quarterback ride it out. Historically, it's certainly been proven to be wise in terms of that pre-Taylor Shire football game.
Oh, well, what I don't get is what you cited earlier is throughout training camp, Bridge and Collaros were back and forth taking first-team reps, and there was the whole song and dance over who was going to be the starting quarterback that Chris Jones wasn't ready to announce, and it ended up being Zach Collaros, as we all knew it would be. But we played the game anyways, and I think we're a pretty good dance partner for Chris Jones during that first week of the season on who was going to start. And Brandon Bridge, I thought he was number 2 easily, but that quickly you've gone to David Watford. And maybe that Montreal game rattled the Saskatchewan Roughriders a little bit, but Brandon Bridge hasn't shown much of the imagination or inspiration that he is the guy some people in Rider Nation thought he was. He hasn't thrown a touchdown pass. He's thrown 3 interceptions, and his completion percentage is better than David Watford, but he hasn't been wow. However, you have to stick with him. I'm not giving him 4 games. I'm giving the Hamilton game and the Calgary game. And unless Zach Collaros is healthy and ready to go, of course, and that's it. If he's still uninspiring, well, okay, because this defense, I think, is too good to waste on poor quarterback play, and you're going to have to try to find something else. Maybe they trade for Johnny Manziel.
That would liven it up a little bit.
Just a little bit.
And then they can move him to defense. Sorry.
How does he play safety anyway?
Any final thoughts, Taylor, before I let you and Jamie get on with your Sunday?
I think if you ask both quarterbacks, they would prefer 1 full game and not be taken out as opposed to this back and forth. All right, Bridge, you get the first game, Watford, you get the second game, vice versa. You play your 60 minutes, and then we'll evaluate from there who's going to start the third game. Maybe that's the best way to go, as opposed to 2 series. You can't get into a rhythm. You're always looking over your shoulder. I couldn't imagine working like that. All right, am I working for these next 2 hours? Oh, nope, somebody else is going to take my spot.
Well, Ian Duffy's pretty good.
Yeah, he's an up-and-coming. So maybe he's going to jump in here, and I'm going to be out. And
yeah, you get the first 2 stories tonight on the Sportscast, and then Ian's going to come in for the next 2, and we'll see where it goes from there.
It doesn't work.
Ariel Zur is an extraordinary talent, too. So, Jamie, I'd be very careful.
Yes. I get 2 minutes, then she gets 2 minutes. And then the texters start texting saying, keep Ariel on the air. And, well.
306, 306.
Yeah.
Which is me weighing myself twice. Sorry. Taylor, thank you so much for being with us. Taylor Shire of Global Regina. Jamie Nye of 980 CJME, Rolco Radio. Jamie Nye, the sports guy, host of the Green Zone. Father of 2.
Yes.
I'm Rob Vanstone. This podcast can be heard on leaderpost.com, iTunes, and Google Play Music. Right, Mark? That's the first time I've gotten that right.
There you go.
This is a momentous thing for me. Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, Jamie. Sorry you had to put up with me. I'm Rob Vanstone. We'll talk to you again next week.